Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Batman Broken City. Now, Broken City is a comic book story arc written by Brian Azzarello, illustrated by Eduardo Risso, and published by DC Comics in Batman issues 620 through 625 in 2004. And later on, those issues of Batman were collected as a trade paperback. Now, the character of Batman was originally created by Bob Kane Bill Finger, and I'm doing this review as part of my yearly series of Batman reviews. Now, Brian Azzarello would go on to write graphic novels like Joker and Batman Damned, and he would go on to co-write The Dark Knight 3, The Master Race, with Frank Miller, which was the third book of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns trilogy. He also wrote the animated adaptation of Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, but the less we know about that movie, the better. But I do like Brian Azzarello from the stuff of his I've actually read. So, the plot of Broken City is Batman is tracking a low-level criminal named Angel Lupo, whose sister had recently been murdered, and Batman thinks that he might have had something to do with his sister's murder, but when he runs into Lupo's lover, she's like, no, he never would have done something like that. But he goes on the run, and all of a sudden, a little boy's parents are murdered right in front of him. Now, if you know anything about Batman's backstory, you know that this really strikes a chord with Batman, and he thinks that Angel Lupo killed this boy's parents, so now he takes this personally and is determined to track this guy down. But as the story goes on, we learn that Batman is not the only one looking for Angel Lupo. It turns out several criminals like the Penguin, the Ventriloquist, and these newcomers to Gotham City known as Fat Man and Little Boy are also looking for Lupo. And the question becomes, who will get to Lupo first? Them or Batman? So yeah, Broken City is a solid read, both if you're a fan of Batman, but also if you're a fan of those classic noir detective stories, because this really does have the feel of that. Like, yes, the story is set in a heightened comic book reality, and yes, we're dealing with a lot of these bombastic, larger-than-life characters like Killer Croc, the Ventriloquist, the Penguin, like I said, the Fat Man and Little Boy characters. The Joker shows up at one point, yet the story itself feels like a relatively grounded detective story. I also like how the comic, in a way, is sort of an analysis of the city itself, how there's something wrong with the city itself, that there's something about Gotham City that is fundamentally broken, fundamentally rotten. Like, there's something about the city itself that almost breeds crime. And the book does explore Batman as a character. Granted, it's nothing we haven't seen before, but it still gets into the psychology of Bruce Wayne / Batman. Now, like I said, throughout the comic, Batman thinks that Lupo killed this boy's parents, and this subplot in the story actually does have a pretty interesting twist that I'll admit I did not see coming. The characters of Fat Man and Little Boy are also pretty interesting. I want to point out the character of Little Boy is actually a woman, and they're Japanese, and their names are an obvious reference to the atomic bombs that the United States dropped on Japan at the end of World War II. But these characters, especially Little Boy, do prove to be formidable foes to Batman. Now, Eduardo Risso's artwork in this is very Frank Miller-esque, and I'm not necessarily saying that as a bad thing, but especially how he draws some of the women in this comic is, again, it's very, very Frank Miller. But the artwork does work for the most part for the tone of story that this is, but I'll admit, this kind of artwork, it's not typically my cup of tea. But it's a good story. It's a really good, self-contained Batman story. But yeah, that was my review of Batman Broken City, and bye.